We are in some kind of golden age for cinematic animated features. Every year, it seems like we have another new franchise bursting onto the scene, earning millions upon millions of dollars, spawning sequels, prequels, spin-offs, and TV adaptations. Obviously, this isn't always the case. There can be a myriad of reasons why a movie doesn't catch with audiences the way it was intended to. But that end result isn't always a reflection of the quality of the film itself. This is the space where 2010's Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole resides. An oft-overlooked movie about a group of misfit owls tasked with saving their kingdom from the talons of a murderous dictator. The common consensus of this feature is that it's a goofy owl story taking place entirely in a CG world. But to anyone who has seen it, they'll give you an entirely different take, citing its surprisingly dark and serious approach to what could easily have been a typical, swashbuckling adventure movie for the littlest of kids. But what is it about this story that fans continue to rave about long after this film's original heyday? Why does its myth continue to grow as the years go on? Let's find out and explore the world of Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole. The film, Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole, began seemingly as an attempt at a new cinematic trend. Fresh off of 2006's out-of-nowhere hit Happy Feet, Warner Bros. Pictures, looking to replicate that massive success at an avian adventure story, obtained the rights to the book series Guardians of Ga'Hoole. Written by American author Catherine Lasky, Guardians of Ga'Hoole is a series of 16 books, beginning in 2003, following the life of a young barn owl named Soren in a world devoid of humans where talking owls are the dominant species. The movie takes its story from a loose combination of the first 3 books, which deal with mature and often morose themes, including fascism, persecution, and brainwashing, likely heavily inspired by Lasky's interest in World War II at the time. With Warner Bros. Now owning the cinematic rights to the property, it would be helmed by Zach Snyder, who had previously directed 300 and the Dawn of the Dead remake. Snyder's involvement began as more happenstance than anything else. As he explains in an interview with MovieWeb, "What attracted me to the project, there's these 2 paintings used to pitch the business to Warner Bros. To say, hey, we did Happy Feet, you have this Legend of the Guardians movie, we can do that too." And I saw those paintings and I was in my buddy's office and I said, "What are those?" And he said, "That's Legend of the Guardians. You wouldn't, it's a family film." And I said, "Really? Could be cool. Looks cool." So I flipped through the paintings and was like, "This is awesome, dude. What's the story?" And they go, "Well, they don't have a director. You wouldn't be interested in that." And I said, "Well, let me read the books." So I read the books and I really connected to that sort of Star Warsian, Joseph Campbell hero's journey. It was super simple, straightforward, good versus evil, the young squire becomes a knight, and for me that was like, that journey, I'd really like to try. So with Snyder committed to the project, it was fair to wonder if the movie would adopt the book's more serious tones. And Snyder reassured viewers it wouldn't be the standard jovial animated fare audiences were used to. I felt like the kind of movies kids are exposed to these days are comedy. There's not a lot of straight mythic journeys for children. The other thing is, we made the movie so that we took it seriously. There's some light moments, but there's light moments in the book. It's that balance to have a couple of what we call fun characters, as opposed to having a joke a minute, like Shrek style. The promise for an adult approach to this movie was supported by the casting of its voice actors, with each person bringing a certain level of gravitas, including some particularly accomplished names, starting with Jim Sturgis and Emily Barclay, and highlighted by all-time talents Helen Mirren and Jeffrey Rush. But perhaps what the movie is most remembered for is its incredible visuals. The studio behind this is Animal Logic, an Australian visual effects studio that also works in animation. And while you may not know their name, if you've watched movies since the millennium, then you're undoubtedly familiar with at least some of their work. A few of their best known projects they've had major effects involvement in were The Matrix, 2003's Moulin Rouge, 2006's Happy Feet, 2013's The Great Gatsby, 2014's The Lego Movie, and 2018's Peter Rabbit. An impressive resume, surely, and this movie is the ultimate showcase of the studio's talents. But how does the film itself fare? The adventure starts off with an owl flying through a sky filled with clouds that look like they could be right outside your window. They're so lifelike. This opening scene lasts for only a few seconds, but is the only preparation you'll receive before being thrust into what I regard as being the best looking animated 3D film ever. We follow the owl dive bomb through the clouds over a luscious forest terrain, flying towards the moon as the sun sets over the mountains. Even author Catherine Lasky marveled at the world, saying, "The landscapes. They were like Grandmaster paintings, like Turner landscape paintings." The owl flies through the forest, and the tiny details, such as the subtle way the wind flows through the owl's feathers, the momentum of a branch swinging after the owl snatches a mouse off of it, it's incredible the amount of true-to-life detail that's included. The owl returns to a hole in the top part of a tree, complete with his entire family, which include his wife and 3 kids and a snake, acting as their nursemaid. The owls themselves balance the line perfectly between naturalistic, while allowing for recognizable, human-like expressions and familiar nonverbal emotions. The characters resemble illustrations in a children's book. They're structurally correct in reference to owls, but they're relatable in how they're able to personify themselves. We're introduced to the lead of the story, Soren. He's dressed up in faux armor, pretending to be one of the Guardians, a group of legendary owl warriors, as he play battles the evil Metalbeak, acted out by his fuzzy toddler sister, Eglantine. As the kids wind down to rest, Soren's brother Clud rolls his eyes and states his disbelief of these fairy tales featuring super owls, while Soren is of the opposite mind, wanting to hear the legends ad nauseum. That night, Soren and Clud go out with their father to practice branching, a step in the process of learning to fly, where they glide from tree branch to tree branch. Both brothers are a bit awkward, but Soren seems to be catching on quicker than his brother, who desperately wants to be successful at it. After the parents leave to hunt for food, Soren and Clud sneak back out to practice branching. Soren tries to offer Clud advice on how to fly, saying how he envisions himself flying alongside the Guardians, but this is irritating enough for Clud to shove Soren, who now off balance, knocks both himself and his brother off of the tree, with the two falling onto the forest floor. The moment they realize where they are, they're terrified, and you get the first sense of how small they are in the totality of the world around them. When they're among each other, they're only separated by their age and personalities, but when they're out of their element, we see how small and helpless they are, ultimately reminding us that they're children. The two are unable to fly back up the large tree, and are pursued by a scary possum that chases them. It attacks Clud, but Soren fends him off. Then the possum pins down Soren. With Soren crying out to Clud for help, Clud instead hides, willing to let his brother perish in order to preserve his own life. But you get the impression here that, while Clud is scared for his own life, some sort of pressure or weight would be lifted off of him if his brother were to disappear permanently. Before anything lethal occurs, the possum is fought off, and the young owls are picked up by 2 much bigger owls, who start flying away from the forest. Soren pleads for their safe return, but their captors refuse, and continue to fly through the next morning into a completely new land. droves of owls carrying smaller owls in their clutches begin to flock together. At this point is when we meet Gylfie, an elf owlet, and Emily Barclay does a fantastic job of acting frightened. She's in full panic, questioning where the owls are taking them. They're flown through a rocky wasteland, passing by a guard owl with a metal helmet standing next to a torch. It looks like Mount Mordor from Lord of the Rings. There's no greenery we previously saw in Soren's home, with the only warmth present being the red sky hovering behind the clouds. The young owls are dropped off together and explained by a large, rugged owl that their parents have abandoned them, and they are now orphans who will repay being rescued by performing manual labor. The monotone way the owl explains it gives you the feeling that he's made this speech many, many times before. When the young owls protest their capture, a sleek, white owl lands upon a nearby perch, announcing herself as Naira, General of the Tyto, which is the same type of barn owl as Soren and Clud, and introduces herself as the second in command to the Pure Ones. When Gylfie demands their release, Soren stands up for her, with Naira banishing the two to be pickers. As they're being ushered away, Soren yells for Clud, and when Naira asks if he's his brother, Clud silently looks away, to which Naira replies, "Now there's a soldier." Soren and Gylfie arrive at the Picker's mine, where we see the full moon illuminating the night sky. The group of young owls are instructed to look up at it, to which Gylfie wordly warns Soren that the owls are trying to moon blink them, which causes anyone who stares at the moon for a prolonged period of time to lose their memories of who they are and become mindless servants. It's very eerie to see the rest of the owls with only the whites in their eyes. Soren and Gylfie vow to learn to fly to escape their captors and act moonblinked, walking to their next destination, with Gylfie's walk being particularly funny. Back with Naira and a few select owls, she explains to them that they must feel sorry for the other owls. She says that the Tyto are destined to rule as the Pure Ones and will restore order back to the Owl Kingdoms. As mentioned before, author Catherine Lasky was deep in the weeds with her interest in researching World War II, and this army of Tyto owls acts as this world's fascist army. From referencing themselves as the superior breed to calling their select kind as Pure Ones, the similarities are evident. Frankly, it's a bit frightening to hear the way they speak about themselves and the other owls, but it forces the viewer to acknowledge the unfortunate truth that there are those who truly think that way. At the pellet picking station, the pellets from other owls are to be picked apart until they reveal these small blue metal flecks, which they are to take to a floating blue orb that apparently harms the owl's gizzards. The use of the gizzard is never outright explained, but acts as sort of an inner instinct that guides owls. Think of it as the Force from Star Wars, able to be channeled, with some characters being more in tune to it than others. One of the bad owls can tell Soren and Gylfie aren't moonblinked and takes them to a solitary location, but instead of punishing them, he reveals that he was kidnapped as a youngster as well, and only serves the evil army to protect his family. He agrees to teach them to fly, in hopes they'll be able to escape and retrieve help from the Guardians. Back in the evil owl's lair, Naira decides to test the new recruit soldiers by releasing a bluebird, and the winner capturing it by any means necessary. The young owls chase after it, bumping each other in midair, throwing rocks, and Clud even throws a huge flag, draping the other owls in it before catching the prize. Naira then takes Clud to go see Soren in hopes of convincing him to convert to their side as well. Naira and Clud drop in on Soren and Gylfie and the older owl practicing flying, and Naira and a soldier begin to attack. This is the first of many fight scenes throughout the movie, and the choreography was done in a way that was unconventional for this medium. In an interview with MovieWeb, the animation crew recalls, "One of the things Zach did was get a stunt team involved and actually put on little cardboard claws and pretend to be owls. And we got all these stunt videos that their team did of humans dressed as owls fighting, and that's how we learned to animate our owls and construct some of these battle scenes. It's such a unique perspective that Snyder brings to the table with his experience in real-life action sequences that thankfully matches up with the movie's tone. As the battle rages on, Soren yells for Clud to escape with them. As the older owl pins down Naira, holding her down for Clud to escape, Clud reacts in a scene ripped straight from Star Wars, where Anakin betrays Mace Windu, saving Emperor Palpatine. Clud chooses the side of corruption, distracting the old owl long enough for Naira and oncoming soldiers to kill him. It's emotional, not only to see Soren's brother give in to the darkness, but that their protector has perished, possibly in vain. But luckily, it's enough time for the two owlets to fly away from the wasteland. Naira says to Clud he may have potential after saving her, and when you think he can't get any worse, Clud offers his sister to the cause. He truly is the worst character, having done nothing good in the movie up to this point. Soren and Gylfi, who are now out of harm's way, attempt to catch a moth on the ground, to which a twitchy little owl named Digger pops up. He's kooky and quirky and acts as a bit of comic relief, but nothing overwhelming, just reciting the occasional owl joke. Digger takes them back to the tree he lives in, and shortly after, another larger owl named Twilight enters with a live snake for dinner, who ends up being Soren's nursemaid. Soren explains what's happening and how they need to locate the Guardians, and the group sets out to find the heroic birds. Back at the Dark Empire, Naira presents the new recruits to their leader Metalbeak. He's just as horrific looking as the legends make him out to be, his face covered in a giant metal mask, one of his eyes blind, with the other looking like all his hatred was concentrated into that one spot. He calls out Clud from the line, and Metalbeak is fully aware of his frightening reputation, telling Clud he's correct to be afraid in his presence, and says weakness is for the lower species, and we see Clud's allegiance to the pure ones continue to develop. Soren and company reach the coast, but not sure where to go next, an echidna version of the Lion King's Rafiki comes to aid the group, saying that it was foretold for the group to arrive. And whenever anyone questions or comments his wisdom, he says it was foretold, like he knows everything that's going to happen. He's an entertaining character, and I wish we were able to spend more time with him. He tells them to follow the stars and they will reach their destination, to which Digger responds that it'll be a breeze. And wouldn't you know it, they get stuck in a heavy rain over the ocean. Digger's wings freeze and he says goodbye as he plummets into the ocean. It's a brothers in arms moment, how he's there 1 second fighting alongside his crew, and the next he's just gone. I found it to be a touching instance, how immediate those you're closest to can suddenly be gone when you're in the harsh conditions of battle. Soren dives down to try and catch him, where he happens upon a majestic white owl who's rescued Digger, and leads the group to Ga'Hoole. And it's spectacular. Ga'Hoole is the equivalent of the elf city in Lord of the Rings. But there's nary little time to enjoy themselves, however, as the council debates over Soren's story, with one owl named Alamir highly skeptical of their report. Another wild-eyed owl named Ezelrib is skeptical of Alamir's skepticism. Alamir is prompted by the council to investigate immediately, so he begrudgingly takes flight with 2 other soldiers. An owl named Ochalissa explains to Soren and Gylfi that they're going to go through their basic training to see if they're worthy to be guardians, and it's an awesome moment seeing Soren's silent excitement. It makes you feel like we're witnessing the birth of a new legend. We come to our only montage of the movie, where the owls are in their basic training, learning skills including blacksmithing, navigation, combat, and it's enjoyable to watch. They use mini branches to duel with each other, all over an infectious song by the singer Owl City. Between this movie's Take to the Sky and his other movie's soundtrack song, When Can I See You Again, from Wreck-It Ralph, he's 2 for 2 in my book. We rejoin Metalbeak, now speaking to his army about taking back what is rightfully theirs, and it's unmistakably fascist imagery. From the army chanting Metalbeak, to their stomping in unison, to Metalbeak spitting while giving a speech, which is a subtle nod to a specific fascist leader's actual speaking habits. Clud's little sister, who's watching this all go on, pleads for Clud to let her go, but his response is to make her stare at the moon so she can become moon-blinked. He has gone too far. Just when you think he can't get any more despicable, he continues to find ways to top himself. Ezelrib takes the young Guardians in training to fly in rough conditions through storming rains. He explains that they must use their gizzards to navigate through the storm, and this is the sort of famous scene from the movie showing off the 3D effects, moving in slow motion, flying through each individual raindrop. The animation team said they were inspired by surfing, how surfers would surf in the tube, and that's how they wanted to replicate Soren, using his gizzard to fly in harsh areas. Back at Ga'Hoole, Soren discovers Ezelrib is actually Lies of Keel, the same Guardian Soren was emulating in the beginning of the movie, his hero. This is when we get the most poignant scene in the entire film. Soren asks why he didn't tell him who he was, to which Lies responds, "What difference does it make what I call myself? Fancy it's hard meeting your heroes. What did you expect? Some Tyto owl with gleaming armor and battle claws, the moon rising behind him? This is what it looks like when you've actually fought in battle. It's not glorious, it's not beautiful, it's not even heroic. It's merely doing what's right and doing it again and again." I love the way that Lies is telling Soren that he's in the throes of a new legend being written, and it's not going to go as the stories his father had told him. There will be casualties, and there will be consequences that last long beyond the pages of a book, whether or not he ever lives to see them. So much is explained in an impressive economy of words. It's my favorite part of the movie for sure. Alamir comes back carrying a few Alex he saved, including Soren's sister, who is now moon-blinked. He recounts the ambush he endured with his 2 accomplices having been killed, and the council declares that they're going to war. It's cool seeing them get ready for battle too, equipping their metal talons and helmets. Soren's sister is able to wake up from being moon-blinked and reveals that they weren't rescued, they were handed over, with Soren realizing that it's a trap and flies off to warn the Guardians. Unfortunately, the Guardians are ambushed, with the blue metal flecks being unleashed upon them, affecting their gizzards, rendering them immobile. Soren and his crew arrive to save the Guardians, and Soren locates an area of burning forest, and after grabbing a teapot, carries it and uses his gizzard to fly through the fire, where he grabs enough embers in the teapot, which he throws on the contraption holding the metal flecks, and as it explodes, it renders the metal flecks useless, allowing the Guardians to regain their strength. The final battle ensues with metal talons, claw swords. I could watch these animals fight for hours. It's so intense and violent without ever being explicit or showing any blood. Clyde grabs Soren and throws him into the burning forest again, while Lies and Metalbeak square off. And Metalbeak is so enormous, it feels like any blow to Lies could be the one to end him. Naira comes in to join Metalbeak, giving them an unfair advantage as they beat up on Lies. Back in the Flame Forest, Soren tries to convince Clud to come back to the light, but Clud tries to kill Soren by throwing him into the fire, but ultimately stumbles and ends up falling in himself. Soren grabs a burning branch to face Metalbeak and comes in with branch blazing. The two grapple and battle with each other, and as Metalbeak is about to deliver the killing blow, he's impaled upon the tree branch Soren is holding and collapses on the ground in front of him as Naira commands her army to retreat. Lise congratulates Soren as Soren blankly stares ahead, likely traumatized with the last of his innocence gone after killing another owl. They rescue all the owlets and return to Ga'Hoole, where his parents are waiting, relieved to see him. Soren and his entourage are now accepted as full-fledged guardians, and it really feels like we've been witness to the pages of a new chapter in the story of legends being written, and that someday they'll be remembered too as these larger-than-life heroes. Soren mentions how Clud's body was never found, and we see the destructive brother's silhouette rise up with blood-red eyes staring at Metalbeak's mask, signifying that the battle against evil is still not over. But for now, peace reigns supreme in the land of Ga'Hoole. Legend of the Guardians, the Owls of Ga'Hoole, was slated to be the first in a new cinematic trilogy, but that dream was never realized. Earning just $140 million against a budget of $80 million, any hopes of a sequel, let alone any involvement with the IP on a major scale, were shelved at that point, despite the cast and crew's willingness for further involvement. But why did it fail? This is all speculative on my part, of course, but in the game of logical dominoes, the studio had just experienced the wave of acclaim over its previous film Happy Feet, which nearly quadrupled its $100 million budget. Naturally, there would be a desire to capitalize on this newfound moneymaker, but what was it that drew audiences to that movie? In their minds, it must have been the avian factor. Yes, just as Beanie Babies had repopularized stuffed animals, Happy Feet would make movies about birds the next big craze, which kids would be fluttering to theaters over. Warner Brothers tried its best to make the pivot from lovable dance-filled musical comedy to an action-oriented film about warring factions of owls. But sometimes the movie comes out and the thought of "who is this for?" comes up. It's too gritty for young kids, but too kiddie for adults. Ultimately, I would describe Legend of the Guardians as a mistake, one that lost money at the box office and failed to jumpstart a new wave of kids' movies. It's more thematically advanced than most, considering the demographic it was intended for, and I am so grateful for Warner Brothers' miscalculation, because this movie is meant for people like me, those who want their cartoons to be taken with the same seriousness as live-action films, for the ones who don't want their cartoons to just be silly misadventures filled with wisecracks and topical references, to us folks who want to have the production team give the same thoughtfulness that us viewing the final product are willing to pour into it. I'll always have fond memories for Legend of the Guardians, the Owls of Ga'Hoole, for daring to be different in so many ways. Not only tonally, and with its visual construction, still being the best 3D animated film I've ever seen, but for not letting preconceptions about what cartoons should be hold it back, while not only shattering what children's movies could be, but what they can be. And in a time now where so many authors are disappointed by Hollywood's interpretations of their works, see Dr. Seuss's widow, who was so distraught by 2003's live-action Cat in the Hat, she banned live adaptations of Dr. Seuss's books from ever being produced again. It's refreshing to hear Catherine Lasky's satisfaction with Snyder's vision of her original material. They are so faithful to the spirit of the story and the spirit of the characters, and that's what's most important to me.